One good thing that did happen during this era was it was a coming together of people helping each other. To give you an example, we talked about in class about these penny auctions. When farmers' possessions were auctioned off to pay off their bank loans, often the community would pay pennies for those items and then give them back to the farmers. 250,000 teenagers left home to free up so that their parents would have one less mouth to feed, and they rode the rails. They rode when the crops were coming in California. They rode out to California. When the crops were coming in Texas and Florida, they rode there. They followed the work where it was. Hobos, really. And here you can see different people catching trains. Riding the rails was cheap. If you got caught, you can get your head busted in, or you might even get killed. The fringe parties began to grow because a lot of people who were poor and out of work thought, well, this democracy is not working, so I'm willing to try anything. So the parties of the socialists and the communists grew. A lot of times, landlords were jacking up the rents to make more money because they were losing money too, and there weren't as many people being able to afford rent. So they would gouge the people who could afford it, and they began to form groups to protest the rent increase. And people generally had to accept getting handouts, getting free things. These are guys selling apples on the streets of New York. This is one of the most famous pictures of the era. It says, "Jobless men, keep going." I don't know what town this is, but we can't take care of our own, so don't stop here. Change was coming, though. Prohibition was repealed. That was good. That sort of made what were illegal jobs legal jobs again. And 8 states kept prohibition. And probably the biggest beacon of hope during the Great Depression was the building of the Empire State Building. Look at these guys sitting up here with absolutely no safety harness at all. These guys were working on the Empire State. Lots of people died during the building of the Empire State Building. Empire State Building, if you haven't been there in New York City, it's 67 elevators, 100 stories tall. At that time, it was the world's tallest building. It dominated the New York skyline, and a lot of people looked at the Empire State Building, and even though we had this huge unemployment problem, a huge homeless problem, if we can build this, we can fix this problem, God willing, in the country. Hoover's reaction was this. He was told by business leaders who he had trusted that the help would come, and that the business would be able to fix the problem that happened, but help didn't come because quickly the businesses found out they didn't have as much money as they did before the Great Depression, and they didn't have any money to spend on any help. Hoover and the government began to create some job programs, but a lot of people thought that it wasn't enough and it wasn't quick enough. They began to discount mortgage rates so you could stay in your home, or at least if you didn't have as much money as you used to, be able to afford to buy a home. And the government began to loan money to banks so those banks would not go out of business. Still didn't look very happy there. Hoover was really relying on private charities and local government to give aid and relief to people and to businesses. But there's no way that the problem became so massive so quickly that private charity couldn't meet the demand. The most famous of these is the Bonus Army. In 1932, there was a group of World War I veterans who were promised a pension at the end of World War I, but they weren't going to give it till 1945. Well, they needed it now. So they marched to Washington and said, "We want our bonus. Please give us I know we're not supposed to get it for 13 more years, but we need it now." And there they are. They were driven away by the Army. So on the news, we got to see our United States Army forcing veterans who were protecting themselves with sticks and bricks and stones. They were being forced off the Capitol Mall in Washington, D.C. And I think we'll start next class, and we'll just talk briefly about the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And that's the end of this part of the lecture.